Okay.
All right.
Okay. So the meeting is convened. A committee of the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board to consider issues related to low activity waste. That's our mission. So we did have a draft agenda, and I think there's kind of two issues right off the bat: membership and then leadership. And my proposal for membership is that people can come and go as they would like, but the people that I'm looking at on the screen right now, and there may be several others, would be kind of a core group. Any objections or thoughts on that before we go ahead? Okay. So number two is leadership, and in terms of this committee, I would expect the leader to, from time to time, convene meetings like this, put together the agenda, and then be the focal point to report back to the board, and also assuming that this committee drafts, for example, comments on the supplemental analysis or the WEIR, that kind of the chair of this committee would kind of get that together and present that to the board. So that's my thoughts about what the leadership role would be. Any comments on that? So now we're looking for a volunteer. Hey, Mike, you just raised your hand.
I did. There's an old saying, though, that you don't want an expert to be the leader. Well, if you're fine with it, I'd be happy to lead it. But experts tend to get picky. And
into the weeds.
Yes.
Is there anyone else that has any interest? I'm actually looking at you, Mia, but you have a job, I know.
I can lead it.
Second Mia too.
I'm happy to lead it, Jeff.
Okay, so I would, as a member of the committee, nominate Mia to be our fearless leader. Is everybody okay with that? Yes? Great. Okay, I'm at this point going to do just a little bit of a speech to kick off this, the discussion that we want to have today. So after I've reviewed a lot of this information, not all of it, on the supplemental analysis and what DOE plans to do with low activity waste, I definitely believe that we must comment, and I think Odo would agree that we must comment on the supplemental analysis. My view is that the supplemental analysis combined with the upcoming WEIR open a regulatory pathway for treatment and disposal of low activity waste as grout. Now that was kind of opened up in the holistic agreement. These are the next regulatory, if you will, check boxes to move that forward, that process forward. The problem is that DOE really does not yet have a plan, nor can they explain to us exactly what they're going to do with the low activity waste and the byproducts. So they want to clear the regulatory underbrush and then proceed and make decisions as they go. And some of those decisions we may or may not agree with. I think we could agree that speeding the process up and being expeditious in decision making is a good idea. However, Oregon would certainly like to preclude the off-site transportation of liquid radioactive waste across the state. So then the question is, how do we maintain our objection or our ability to legally challenge that sort of decision. There may be others if we don't agree with what DOE does in the future. So that fundamentally is the reason I think why we have to be fairly aggressive about commenting on this supplemental analysis and perhaps the WIR. DOE is relying on this 2012 environmental impact analysis, 2012 EIA. A lot of things have changed since then, and you guys have seen some of the things we've thrown over the wall. And from my standpoint, and coming out of industry where you had to go through phase gates and projects would get recycled if there was an issue or a problem. And this particular project has multiple issues that in an industrial sense would cause the decision makers to recycle and reconsider. And transportation of thousands upon thousands of rail cars or trucks of liquid radioactive waste across Oregon would be one of those very significant issues that would cause a recycle. They have not looked at that. The EIA did not. There's some arm waving that we would be okay if we follow DOT standards, but the reality is if there's an accident and something tips over in the Deschutes River, did they consider that scenario? And the answer is no. There's also several other alternatives that were not fully fleshed out in 2012. I still think some of the tanks, maybe not all of them, some of the tank farms probably should get fully excavated and removed. They did not really look at that. They just kind of looked at it en masse. And one of the reasons that they rejected that was they said the radiation hazard, the gamma radiation hazard was too high for workers. And this was based on 1990s information. The radiation has decayed to less than half of it was then. So that's a significant change in terms of what the risk to the workers would be. The other issue that I've really been thinking about, Mike, is they're going to be removing something like 95% of the radioactive content from the low activity waste in pretreatment, a la TSCR, right? But they don't have a plan to deal with that waste, that high level waste that they're going to be generating. So the moving it to grout and even vitrification where it is today, that may all be well and good, but DOE has not explained to us what they're going to do with these high-level waste streams that are going to be generated and most likely stored on site for some indeterminate period of time. And then when you take all of the radioactivity or 95% of the radioactivity out of the low activity waste and turn it into grout, then the question is, does it go off site? Does it go on site? The 2012 EIA says part of it's going off site, part of it's going on site. So they haven't told us what they're going to do. So that's my lead in. So I would kind of open it up to discussion. There, by the way, I've got a whole list, and I'm not sure what I've sent you at this time, but there's a whole list of like 15 or 20 major changes or deviations from where we are now to where that original EIA was promulgated. And the question for this group is, which, if any of those, would we like to call out and comment on? So that's going to take a little bit of work over the next, say month. Do we comment on all of them, or do we just pick out the ones that we're most concerned about? So, Mike, back to you and your isotopic concentrations, and where do they go? What happens to this?
what happened to this stuff. I am something of a student of history, and so the target for stabilizing materials for 1,000 years, it just sort of resonated with me. The other is that I have worked with disposing of materials, not directly with Grout, but was on the periphery of several attempts to use grouting techniques to dispose of oil field waste. And it failed so badly that I'm just always a little bit cautious. The thing that I discovered in my attempts to deal with waste was that rarely are you able to obtain representative samples. There are natural inhomogeneities in large collections and large containers. And so you might recall at almost every meeting I ask, how wide is the training set that you use to qualify the materials for use? As I dig into the underlying research, I find that, by God, they have done a lot of work. But it's hard to track that work over the decades. The Grout, they admit upfront, is a less secure medium for sequestering radioactive materials than is the glass. But as was brought to light in one of the things that Jeff circulated, there are, and I suspected this, if you go back through the notes, there are aspects of the vitrification process which folks have been less than forthright about. In particular, the volatility of technetium species. And of course, it's technetium that's probably the single most concerning isotope for the long term. The plan to catch it in filters and then recycle it in through the vitrification process until it's trapped, that doesn't sound like a very elegant solution to me. On the other hand, putting it into Grout, where it can also escape, is also also problematic. So I myself don't see a clear solution to that problem, but it certainly makes me want to ask questions. The other question I had was, with Yucca Mountain off the table, where are they going to put this stuff? And the current plan to open the, is it the Esper? The, shoot, I have that open right here. The on-site disposal site that's open near 200 West, where they're going to be burying these Grout materials, or at least some of them.
Are you talking about IDF? The Integrated Disposal Facility?
Yes, but it's got a 4-letter acronym that starts with an E.
ERDF?
ERDF. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that won't be taking grouted tank waste. I don't want people to get confused. They will not be disposing of grouted tank waste in ERDF.
No,
Well, they
no,
might.
no LAW there?
The
law,
2012 EIA says that they are going to, and that's still the governing document. I mean, again, this is a major deviation from that.
Go ahead and clarify my understanding.
Not grouted tank waste. Ecology is very clear that grouted tank waste cannot be disposed of on the Hanford site. Grouted something else, I don't know, maybe Matt knows more, is okay. I think is going to be disposed of maybe an IDF and ERDF.
No, IDF would be the location for what they call secondary solid waste. So when they take materials such as HEPA filters, protective equipment, sometimes things like that, that is what they call the secondary waste stream, and there is an allowance for that into IDF, and it's a fairly significant volume, but that material, the total radiological load, especially of these highly mobile soluble isotopes like the technetium and the iodide, in this case, is under the acceptance criteria for IDF. So that can go there, but that's secondary waste. We have to remember that that is different than the supplemental waste that we're talking about today. And secondary waste, there was a lot of research done to that to make sure that those loads would stay under IDF acceptance criterion. IDF cannot accept this supplemental waste or from the various tanks because of those technetiums and iodide loads. So that's why it has to be shipped off-site, this material.
There was a discussion of ion exchange resin in that in the same sentence, HEPA filters and ion exchange resin. And the primary use for ion exchange resin, as I understand it, is the absorption of cesium. Although I now see strontium being listed with a different one. That's not the route for disposal of that material?
No. So if I recall correctly, in this the tank closure and waste management, this is called TCWM. That's what it's called. That's that 2012 one. That had not. The reason it says it can still go to IDF is because a lot of the research that now prevents it, and the agreements with Washington Ecology had not been done yet, and they were still projecting to remove technetium from the waste stream with a resin similar to how they do it out at the
Tisker.
No, not Tisker. I'm thinking of the extraction place. What's that place called? Where they do all the water treatment.
Pump and treat?
Yeah, the pump and treat. So they're going to use it similar to the pump and treat resin, but that's no longer a part of the direct feed low activity waste system. It's not there, so the technetium is not being taken out.
So Matt, has Rev 10 been superseded?
Rev 10 hasn't been superseded, but it has been antiquated. Again, not a part of, or not potentially not a part of our topic today, but the new the whole life cycle cost and schedule analysis will be coming out soon. That will then inform the next Rev, because it has stuff from holistics and everything else.
Because Rev 10 does.
Oh, sorry. I was talking about system plan, but Rev 10, go on.
Rev 10 does have on-site disposal of supplemental low activity waste.
Yes.
Okay.
What is Rev 10?
Site-wide permit, I believe.
No.
So the next one, the one that's currently in operation is Rev 8C, and the one that we're all waiting to come out is Rev 9A.
Yeah, what is Rev 10 that we're talking about, Matt? The one, that octopus diagrams.
Yeah, here's another thing we have to be careful of is all the RCRA permitting. Those are often called a Rev. You might be thinking of System Plan
Yes.
10,
Yes.
which
Yes.
Yeah, which does have all where a lot of these streams are going, but in a broad stroke type document. And that has been superseded by holistics. And because of that, I wouldn't rely on System Plan 10 not until this life cycle scope report comes out, and then System Plan 11, because there'll be a whole negotiation done with ecology starting this year on the next system plan.
Okay, which kind of takes us back to originally, they haven't told us what they're going to do. Because there obviously is conflicting information and conflicting documents out there about how the waste is going to be treated and where it's going to be disposed of. And that fundamentally is a problem. So in our comments, there's questions like this that we should ask in the comments. I do believe, please explain to us whether or not you're going to follow the, this or that document.
Mm-hmm.
As an aside, Rev 10, I believe you're referring to the River Protection Plan. Document AR 227 something.
That's something I can do a little research on. Esteban, you have your hand raised now. What's up?
Yeah, the big thing I think, and what Jeff, the big thing is like on the intent, the agenda. What to me, the thing that I think you're repeating it, is like that. What that really means, the 2 bullet points about DOE is trying to fast track grouting and offsite disposal without triggering NEPA reset, and then the strategy hinges on classifying waste as low activity waste under WEIR. I think that's kind of like the overview, right? And to me, that's when it's stuff like subcategories on like what Jeff said. What is it that because like on the 2012 study, I mean, a lot of things have changed. And remember, I think at the last Oregon Hanford cleanup meeting, to me, the big thing overall is that I kind of kept asking Brian Vance about, well, if you don't get the money, but now the reality is that he's no longer here. And, he's not going to say that, hey, well, I left because I wasn't going to get the stuff, right? So to me, like those 2 bullet points kind of really jump out and then kind of go from there, right? I don't know what everybody thinks.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so that I think Jeff is referring to the River Protection Plan, Rev 10, which is AR 27710 Rev 10, issued December 27th, 2023, signed by Delmar Noyes.
Well, I know Delmar does a lot of tanks, so this is sounding like the system plan to me. Let me confirm that when I get into the AR real quick.
Yeah, River Protection Project System. Rev 10.
System plan. Yeah, that's System Plan 10.
Yeah.
Mia, would you chime in on the overall SA? What you've taken from it, and what do you want to see out of this group before I kind of go through what I've seen?
Right. And also, Mia, you've been party to discussions at the HAB, so if you could clue us in on those as well.
I don't know if I have much to add from the HAB side, although we did have a presentation about the advanced modular pretreatment system today, which it sounds like a very similar system would be placed in the 200 West area for this grouting project. But it was more specific to the new updated TISCR system in 200 East today. But I mean, Matt, I reached out to you and thank you for responding about, so there's this document that came out in March from H2C, which is the new contractor for tanks. And all of like data that they're using in this essay is based on this document called the Supplemental Data Report, is how they refer to it in the essay. And yet, you go to the administrative record and it's not available. I was wondering if it's just an internal document only. It apparently isn't, according to Matt, that it'll be coming out with the waste incidental to reprocessing comment period that should be coming out soon. And we'll be reaching out to the DOE contact next week to see if they know when that will be coming out. But it's, I was really surprised to see that they expect 30% of the waste to be Class A and 70% of the waste to be Class C. And it's kind of perfect for the disposal sites where they want to send it, because I think the 30% of Class A waste is going to Clive, Utah, which is like, I think the limit of how much they can accept. I need to go back and look through it more, but
it's reversed. It's the 70% to Texas is the limit that they can accept, pretty much.
Gotcha. Okay, I knew it was one of them, but it's like, this is kind of sketchy that.
So can you elaborate a little bit the difference between Class A and Class B and where they say it's going and what you think is going on behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, honestly, it all comes down to being able to see this report, the supplemental data report that should be coming out soon. But Class A is like the lowest level of low-level waste. And Class C is, I mean, this is how I understand it. So Class A is the lowest, then Class B, Class C, and then it goes into greater than Class C, and then high-level waste or true waste are completely different classifications. So there's a facility in Clive, Utah, which can only, my understanding is only can accept Class A. And then the other facility in Texas, Waste Control Specialists, can accept up to Class C. So this breakdown, and Matt, maybe you can explain it better, but it sounds like the Texas facility can only accept up to like 70% of how much of this waste is going to be the 32 million gallons or 39 million gallons, which is another concern I have. But it's like, that's their limit. Or maybe
That's
I'll pass it to you, Matt.
Permitted disposal capacity. They have two capacities. One's for solids and one's for liquids that they can treat, that we'll have to keep in mind and are discussed in the essay. Before I go into my portion, Esteban, what have you got?
Yeah, to me, I think with the switch of contractors, like Mia mentioned in the red flag, then that becomes the huge red flag. The internal document, what is it, to see what's really happening. And I know what's happened, like with the Utah and I know Texas is currently suing to not accept all this waste, but I think it's Utah only. So, I mean, again, I think that's the argument that's been made, right? That are they really trying to make this whole reclassification? And to me, that's a huge red flag with the contractors, right? Because, and I think Michael mentioned about the grouting and the safeness of it. So I think, like Jeff said, in for Oregon, going through Oregon, I mean, what's going to happen if there's a spill, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, like, what's
I will say in DOE's favor, while it is, I hate not having this information available right now. I do expect it in the WEIR, but I don't see contractor malfeasance in this, because this was part of their change in overall contractors, which they just did like last year. Mia, if you might help me, it's like $3 billion a year. They went through the bid process, and it was just the natural cycle to come off and rebid the whole project, not just this little bit. So,
Mia, do you have a positive identification on that document that you're referring to as supplemental?
Well, the supplement analysis is the document we're all talking about, and then this supplemental data report, which is listed under, if you look at the references in the essay,
Yes.
it starts H2C, which is this
H2C.
new contractor for tank farms. And it's not available at the moment. But my hope and what Matt has communicated is that it should come out with the weir, which should be coming out pretty soon in April, is my understanding, sometime in April. So,
Yeah.
so
They
we
had
should get it.
initially, they had initially planned to have a public meeting on the 23rd of this month, but that's now being kicked back because the weir hasn't been released. So that tells me that they are planning for it soon. But as we might know, lots of stuff is going on right now that has caused delays.
Matt, can you give us an idea of what we should expect in the weir?
Well, it's going to be very similar to the weir for Waste Management Area C. If you want to look it up, it's I want to say that is, I forget the document number, but ORP 2018-01 is the draft weir for Waste Management Area C. It talks about isotopic concentrations, where this waste was from, what processes made this waste, how that is incidental to reprocessing, how it has had, because remember, before you can declare it, you've got to prove that this material have those nucleides removed, how they're going to remove the key nucleides to make sure that it's as safe as possible so that it would meet any applicable standards, ARARs, applicable and relevant. And, how they're going to process it, what safety, how they're meeting the safety requirements from the NRC, things like that. So it's also an extensive document. That's going to be a good 300 pages. It might even be more than that because some of the wastes were derived from different processes, like the U farm. So we'll see. Well, that's going to be a beefy read as well. Bobby Levy's here. Esteban, go ahead. You have a question.
So to me, and then looking at the agenda on Oregon's interests, and I think like Jeff mentioned, we're in a completely different world now. Wasn't that the argument too, and about cleanup accelerated and at a lower cost? And I mean, to me, I don't know what everybody thinks. And to me, that's all the signs that, and the left and right resignations and leaving of folks. And at the end, it's like, what's the resources that are going to happen? Especially to me, that's a big thing. I think what Mia mentioned about the contract. I mean, that's part of the bidding process, right? Well, what things are you going to bring in different to the whole cleanup, right?
The prevailing thought is that on a unit basis, the grout is cheaper than the vitrification, and that I would say is a big driver behind a lot of the pushes out there. Whether that's true or not, that is something for the board and the research to show. I would send you to the FFR, the Federal Funded Research and Development, FFRDC report that was done recently on supplemental waste. I know that I referenced that in its Appendix H that does a whole lot of the transportation. I just have to find it somewhere in my computer. But before we go too far,
before we go too far, Rep Levy or someone from her office has joined the call. So Mia, as the new chair of this committee, could you give just a very short brief of what we've been talking about and where we are right now?
And I apologize for being late. I had a committee meeting and it just kept going over because today's the last day we can have bills go across the floor. So we're shoving them through right and left.
Good job.
We've just been sharing our takeaways from reading the supplement analysis on the West Area Risk Management plan for the 200 West tanks. And we've been sharing kind of takeaways that we've individually found, and then talked a little bit about, how we would write comments as OHCB, having a strong strong position on this topic and not kind of shying away from sharing what we really think and feel. And there's a lot of other documents out there. I know Michael has been reviewing a ton of them and can speak to that. But and Matt, you're also our technical expert on this, for sure. And so we're also waiting. A related document to all of this is the waste incidental to reprocessing, the WEIR that is going to be coming out sometime in April on the same thing. But basically is DOE's case for calling this waste not high-level waste, and allowing them to ship it off-site to a disposal facility that isn't a geologic repository. So yeah, that's kind of an overview.
Thanks,
That
Mia.
was a really good overview, actually.
Yeah. So what DOE is trying to do right now with these two documents is kind of open a regulatory pathway so that they can grout the low activity waste. But there's a lot of missing details that we're uncomfortable with, and paramount among those is where are you going to put it? Are you going to move it in solid form or liquid form? And if you're planning on moving liquid radioactive waste through Oregon, we've got a problem with that. So that's kind of where we are trying to understand, what DOE is trying to do, where they're trying to take it, and then how and what we should comment on. There's a whole raft of many dozens of issues, but we probably need to pick and choose the ones that are most important to us to comment on.
So
Matt, I think we interrupted your train of thought. So
I'll get into the big background. So we need to know that the supplemental analysis is the DOE's document that says that they do not have to do further NEPA compliance because the previous environmental impact statements and assessments that they have made are still valid. In this document, they rely on at least three previous EISs. One is a system-wide EIS that was done in 1997. That's the only one they can rely on for the volume that they expect to come from the 200 West tanks, that they now estimate at 32 million gallons liquid.
Matt, you might want to not use so many acronyms.
Oh, sorry. Which one do you need there? EIS, environmental impact statement? Yeah. So that's an environmental impact statement. Those are rather large documents that the DOE has to produce to comply with the NEPA rules should there be a significant change in operations. The SA, the supplemental analysis document, is telling us that they're justifying their decision that there are no major changes. And like I said, they're doing this in three ways. If we go back to the most recent document that they're referencing is both the TBI or testbed initiative, which was 2,000 gallons of liquid, and the secondary waste stream vitrification and transport, which I don't have the gallons in front of me, but I know it's 350 cubic meters. They say that because those are generally the same process that they're going to be doing in 200 West, that those should count for this analysis. But the problem with those documents is that it's 2,000 gallons versus 32 million gallons and 350 cubic meters versus 16,000. It's like 42 times more material shipped off site than were analyzed in those two previous documents. So they then go back to the tank waste, where they justify the fact that they did analysis on building new facilities to grout material should they choose to grout it, because they haven't made that decision. We have to remember, they have not decided whether they're going to grout on site or ship liquid yet. That is not in this document. So they go back to the tank waste to justify that they've done the work on analyzing the impacts of the facilities and the infrastructure needed to support these actions. And then, because the shipment campaign would be so large, they have to go back to the 1997 system-wide environmental impact study to say that we analyzed the shipment campaign for our entire, I mean, you're talking Savannah River, Sandia National Labs, Rocky Flats, when Rocky Flats was still there. Every nuclear site in DOE was analyzed for this. And because these volumes are less than that, they say that the analysis from 97 should still qualify. There is logic behind it, although my initial take is that the logic is stretched. And the fact that they have to cobble together several individual documents to support their findings in this one. Then the essay goes into the analysis of the various methods of transportation and the volumes assumed to be transported. I have to admit, we have to remember that they use bounding conditions. So they try to estimate the worst possible impacts and case scenario by these bounding conditions. The 32 million gallons, I hope, is a high level bounding condition. One thing I am interested in is that they use only a 1.5 volume to volume increase to make liquid into the grout. Because remember, to make that liquid into the cement, you got to add all of these materials, all that fly ash, all the stuff that makes the cement. And they say that it's only going to add 50% to the overall volume, or 50% more, 150%, versus some of the previous studies I've seen, which is 1.8. So I was a little surprised that they didn't use a conservative bounding condition there.
So Matt, how many rail cars of liquid, how many rail cars of grout are we talking about if it got moved off site?
Oh boy.
Just ballpark.
Okay, let me see what I've got up in my notes already. So using the assumptions that they have, oh no. Okay, I'm going to have to dig that up, but I have that. I just wrote it.
As an aside, that 1.5 volume expansion does come out of their test work. But there's always the question of, will that same formulation work for all of the many different compositions in these tanks?
Yeah, and it doesn't, because sometimes you need to use what are called getters to stabilize certain isotopes within that matrix. Silver is famous for stabilizing iodine.
Yes.
But it does involve further chemistry, which might make other isotopes a little more mobile. So let's see.
So Matt, if memory serves, we were talking about 4,000 or 5,000 rail cars.
That is per year. So right now, under what they're proposing, let's do it because there's 2 and 2. There's on-site and off-site, and then grout and liquid. So if they grout on-site and use train, you're looking at 110 train cars per year. Yeah, about 110 train cars per year for 11 years. I'll have to check their assumptions. My old assumptions when I presented in Pendleton were that there would be about a train a month. So their assumptions from what I previously worked on have changed significantly from the old FFRDC report. Not only did they change their volumes, but they also changed how much can go into a train car, and how many cars will go onto a train. Go ahead, Representative Levy, you first, and then Esteban.
Well, you're probably answering what my question is. So keep going, and if it's not answered, I'll put my hand back up. Okay.
Okay. Esteban.
Well, I think, yeah, like you said, I think that was part of your comments about, you know, use of role on transport and Pendleton. I think, remember that was the first meeting I attended. And to me, that's keeps, and then, like you said, now the volume has changed. So to me, there's as the conflict analyst, those are two huge red flags, right? That they're just, to me, that, you know, just concludes that the process, I think, which is all over the agenda, that the process is trying to get speed up and they're trying to get movement on this, right? So I don't know what your thoughts, especially if it's what you say, what one train and the volume has all changed.
Yeah. So many of the assumptions that I previously worked on have changed, and this is something that OHCB may also choose to address, in that their bounding conditions do not seem to give a very accurate portrayal of true actions that will be taken on site. In my opinion, right now, Mia had noted that right now they're assuming only 30% of their liquid waste would be level A, which is the lowest classification, generally accepted as safe for most forms of transportation, should it be handled appropriately under DOT rules. Previously, in the studies I saw, 90% of that material was supposed to be level A or level A, and only 10% was supposed to be level C versus 70%. So that is a major change that the OHCB could choose to address as well. Also, that differs radically from their experience with the test bed initiative, those 2,000 gallons, which ended up being incredibly low level on the radioactive isotopic front, at least. It still does have a hazardous chemical component to it, though. So that is a major departure from previous literature that I've seen. Yes, Rep. Levy.
Well, you kind of came close. Okay, so when we transport this by rail, which Oregon's already had a rail disaster, not from nuclear, but from oil spillage and subsequent fire that started from that. And, you know, Oregon, within our laws, it says you can't transport across Oregon. And because I just literally by the skin of my teeth got my SMR bill passed literally yesterday.
I would say
Yesterday.
Yep.
And
I was watching.
it'll take us a full, 10 years to even get anywhere where we could actually begin, I think, in conservative estimates, maybe longer, to get to actually having it start to even come to fruition, because we're going to have to clear a bunch of stuff, But so how can we guarantee, because I know that's the first thing my colleagues are going to say, is how are we going to guarantee that transporting that through the state of Oregon, we don't have a rail car mishap like before and cause a nuclear disaster?
Well,
or do we know that answer yet, Matt?
DOE will say that there will not be a disaster from this material because they are following all applicable DOT rules and it can be thus transported safely. Now, for this type of material, this low activity waste material, the radiological component, while very hazardous, especially while liquid, is not the primary hazard as some of the chemical components inside of it. That's a judgment call for a lot of folks. But the lower the level, the less likely a nuclear incident will occur. That is one reason that we are advocating for grouting this before it leaves site, though, because grouting provides shielding, and it makes this very soluble material insoluble. I like to use the pool analogy. If you've ever had a pool, you've got to put chlorine in it.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to take that block of chlorine out than it is to take out the liquid that you poured in earlier if you've overdone it. So that is what we've been advocating for, exactly the reasons you said. It decreases the potential harm, in particular, should an incident occur. And one thing we have to remember, that if cost is the driver for DOE, and if they can ship 90% of that material to Clive, Utah, the rail lines that would do that, if they use UP, the quickest, most efficient rail lines do run down the Deschutes into California and then over. And past the Klamath Reservation as well.
Oh, that's going to be a really bad deal.
Yeah. There would be a lot of entities very interested that have never had to deal with Hanford before that would need to get a crash course into what's happening. And I sit there when I'm selfish and I have to go out, if I have to go out to a community and say, this is what's happening, this is why we think it should be allowed or shouldn't be allowed. It's a lot easier for me to sell that solid grout, to advocate for that, than it would be for liquid. That's just selfish. That's not anything on the sciences or anything like that. That's just me having an easier life and an easier job. So
I just know that it was like pulling teeth just to get the Confederated tribes on board to even willing to have language that would include them in the conversation.
Yeah.
And they wrote the language. And then I ended up not saying it correctly and had to make a gigantic apology over it. But in my enthusiasm that we got them to come to the table to talk, but it was worth the apology because I work really well with the Confederated tribes, and I actually have a really good relationship with the majority of the 9 federally listed tribes within the state boundaries, and work with them on a lot of different legislation. And I know that from my conversations with them, that their big worry, everybody's big worry, is that we will move something from my particular bill that would be nuclear waste across other tribal lands, and they're vast in Oregon. And in the state of Washington, you guys have even more to deal with than we do. And the safer we can make it, the happier all of us would be. I think nuclear is the way to go, but I also believe that it has a long shelf life.
Yeah, especially at the end. Well, and getting it started too is also sometimes a long haul.
Yeah.
But yes,
I'll stop talking now.
Oh no. I mean, you're right.
Okay.
Not only you, but OHCB and the governor's office have advocated for solid material should have to go over Oregon.
Okay, thank you.
So we had scheduled this for an hour, so maybe back to Mia, if we could wrap up with what our next meeting expectations are and what we should be doing between now and then.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I'm curious what the group thinks. I know with the Weir coming out soon, I don't know if we want to review that and meet afterwards. Or if
I guess
we want
it depends on when it drops.
I know. Yeah.
So maybe schedule something 2 weeks out and we can be flexible.
And I think the thought I would say is like what Representative Levy said, and I think what Matt said about the crash courts with the communities impacted by the transport route. So I don't know what everybody thinks of that, or what would be the follow-up to that.
Esteban, you might consider reviewing some of OHCB's or ODA's previous written responses. We do address the danger of this going alongside Warm Springs and Klamath tribal entities as well.
Matt, can you reshare that with all of us just so we have a refresher on it?
I will. At the end of
Thank
this,
you.
as part of my duties, I'm going to get this recording uploaded. I'm going to provide links to the FFRDC document that I have referenced, and I can provide links to pertinent comment letters.
Okay, because
Thank
maybe the next time my staff member will have to attend this, or maybe once or twice, because they've had to do it before in the past. And so I make them read everything I have to read so that they know what pertinent questions to ask. Well, actually, both of them really like this. They think it's incredibly interesting. So I'm very fortunate.
Mhm.
Matt, are you in charge of scheduling us?
Likely, yes, since I'm also the one that ends up housing or Odo ends up housing the recordings. Yes.
And are we just picking a random day and hoping that people can attend? Is that the easiest? Okay.
No.
I would say
Jeff-
Fridays are my best days.
Fridays are the best days. That's good to know.
I usually don't have committee on Fridays. I usually have the day off. And really, that's when I do in-district, but I can always rearrange my in-district stuff from Fridays. I mean, I don't know how anybody else feels, but
So that would be either what was it, 25th or the 2nd of May, Mia, your call.
I can't do the 25th. We have our fundraiser, so it would have to be the 2nd.
Okay.
And in the morning, preferably, before noon.
I'm clear with that. That actually works on my work calendar and my personal calendar.
Okay. Tomorrow sometime, expect to see a doodle poll. I don't know how people prefer to get their questionnaires, but I'll identify 4 blocks Friday morning for a 1-hour meeting. There's only 4 blocks. And I'll send it to this group and the broader OHCB if any of them want to join in. It's always open for it to join in on these. And I think that will give enough time for the WEIR to come out and at least an initial impression from the documents we're missing.
Yeah, that sounds great. And just so everyone's aware, the comment period for the essay was extended to May 23rd. So we still have some time to meet a couple more times before that. That is, those comments are due.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, I
Glad we
was
kicked
late.
it out.
If you have any more questions between now and then, as always, feel free to reach out to me as your technical advisor. Mia as well is heading this up if any schedule changes happen. And thank you all.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.